Welcome back, YouTubers. Thank you for checking out this episode of the Darwin Pond Show. All right, episode 7, ladies and gentlemen. As we said at the end of the last episode, it looks clear that our dominant species will be the triple rower, triple stroker. I'm not sure what we're going to call that thing yet. The color variation on the species is up for grabs right now. We see a lot of that blue, purple, pink kind of thing going on, but then you get like the watermelon candy colored ones on the left there. The major advantage I think of this species is if particularly that rowing motion they got going on, if they can further enhance that can be efficient. I have other species, one I'll showcase in a Darwin Pond special called the creature feature later, that does a rowing motion that's very efficient. So if they can work that out, I've seen that be very effective. um, they seem to be pretty good with turning, cumbersome, but they don't get hung up too much. They're able to get themselves orientated in the right direction. They seem to be fairly efficient with food, although it is at the medium setting, so I don't know how well they do with a low food environment. They might consume too much energy for that. But they seem to breed pretty quickly. They got a lot of color variation, which means better selection of mates, or a more diverse selection of mates, which can go both ways. I suppose you mate too much with a different species, you have more mutation chances with the differences in genetics. But in this pond, I don't think we're going to run into that problem. It looks homogeneous as far as species goes. It's just colors that are all over the map. And the downside of the species is that drag that's created when they pull their arms back, and that's burning energy and not getting them anywhere. And that's a creature that doesn't have that problem is going to have a distinct advantage. And I'm going to bring up this parasite, the red worm you're going to see at the end of the season, is an example of a creature that wastes very little energy, to the point where sometimes one feeding on normal settings, the red worm parasite will breed 2 times off of one feeding, and that's insane. You can imagine one food bit produces 2 offspring per creature. That gets they populate quick, and that might be a disadvantage for this type of a creature if they have to feed with every reproduction. Any creature that can do it even a little bit more efficient is going to have a distinct advantage over them. And I can tell you, if we did another random Genesis pond, you would see a different creature evolve. Every time, I very rarely have seen the same one. Occasionally, you see the same style, like a creature that moves with like an undulating motion, like a snake. I've seen multiple limbs like this with rowing, sweeping type of things, and everything in between. Some are not very efficient at all, but because of no other competition, they become the main species. Like this one here, the triple rower, does pretty well, pretty interesting. But you introduce another species that we were just talking about with a little bit more efficiency in any area, this species will end up disappearing. So it's definitely a matter of localized selection, determining who survives and who doesn't. The pond parameters obviously play a huge part, but so does the competition from other species. In the light of no competition here, or the one that was in earlier, the angelfish type of thing, or the squiddy type of things, they obviously weren't as efficient. And that's, if you're a nerd, that's where this type of a program can get a lot of fun, because you can evolve a creature that works in a certain environment and then introduce something else that worked in another environment, and see how it does in the other creature's environment, or vice versa, or change into a whole new environment and see how each one of these do. Something from a high food, something from a low food. You put them in a pond with like medium type of food settings, and then you see what comes out of it. Not only the hybrid of this creature's genetics, but the fittest ones of that hybrid. So it creates whole new concoctions of things, mixing all that stuff together like a mad scientist. Makes you wonder if, like all the high tech experiments they do in the world with AI and robotics and all that stuff, if something like this could go on in a computing environment. Could programs, viruses, spy tech, and AI routines, things like that, could those combine and create emergent type of properties that aren't predicted? Because like you drop 150 swimmers in, like we did in the beginning of this one, with all random properties, and then out of it pops this three-armed rowing type creature and becomes the dominant species. I don't think there was really any way for anybody seeing that first batch of 150 creatures, most of them dying off pretty quickly, not able to even find food. Nobody could have predicted we'd see one dominant species of this particular form with all the different color variations we see. And now it looks like there's almost two main color variations, right? The purple blue style, the watermelon candy style. Those seem to be the ones that are jumping out at me the most here when looking at this screen right now. Just an overview of the pond. Those are definitely the two color groups we see merging, although a majority of them are going to eat themselves into that corner and die off. Which, if you're looking at the screen quickly right now, you would say that those watermelon candy ones are in the best position. You got a group just above the mass there, a couple of them actually in the food areas. So based on how the pond normally goes with the famine that comes at this point now, you see the population peaking, the food bottoming. So with the culling that's going to come here, I'm going to take a guess and say the watermelon candy ones are going to benefit here. They're just in the lucky position of where the food is growing out from. You know, the grazers are all on the bottom and now they're out of food. And most of those are the purple blue ones. You have those clusters of the watermelon candy ones right above them, and then way up to the north you have a melting pot of, looks like various colors from this perspective. And if you get some interesting colors and you just kind of sit back with it zoomed out and let it run while you're doing something else, and you peek over occasionally, it looks like, you know, bacteria, little things growing in a dish, which I guess is the idea. But, you know, like if you kind of just sit back and let your eyes unfocus a little bit, it just looks like crawling little germs. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. So as we were saying, look at the all the creatures down there in the southwest corner, all like, oh crap, nothing to eat. Well, cannibalism's an option, I guess. I'm surprised that they don't have something along those lines with the dying ones. You know, maybe like the carrion type of feeding. That would be interesting. And it's weird because occasionally you'll see a live one swimming back and forth near a dead one, almost as if it's like, is it thinking about eating it? Is it thinking about mating with it? A little necrophilia? I mean, I don't know. If I spot it, I'll zoom in for you, but it's not a super common occurrence. I've seen it a few times. Now that cluster of mixed colors in the north's getting large. That could be interesting. So I think you can see the watermelon candy ones there are moving up towards that growth of food there in the pasture. See what this motley crew's doing. Yeah, they're pretty well mixed in terms of color. I got a couple patches scattered around that might stand a chance. I know you got that group in the middle right of the bottom center there, that watermelon candy group, moving up towards that cluster of food right in the middle now. Let's take a look at these guys. All fairly homogeneous. Yeah, access to food, that's only going to give them a boost. No, we're going to have looks like they soaked up some watermelon candy color, huh? Not quite the purple, not quite as dark. Or maybe that's the same. I don't know. Yeah, it probably is. I think at this point, though, based on the fact that they've absorbed the squiddies and the angelfish ones and mixed among themselves, and they all have multiple colors, you're seeing a real patchwork, yeah. And it looks like a lot of the watermelon candy style ones are going after the yellow mates. You can see a lot of the yellow eggs on the proboscis there. Yeah, the dominant color at the neck. Oh, got a little group group there that might survive a bit. You got some just wandering in the middle of the pond looking for food. There's another one there, guys. Oh yeah, you see a huge cluster in the center there, the top center left. The watermelon candy style ones. There's quite a large population. And they have access to a pretty large swath of food. So they're going to keep pressing on in that direction. I don't really think there's going to be too much to stop them there. So we should see the watermelon candy style creatures become much more frequent here. They hit this food patch, their population will spike, which is going to, I would think, make them more likely to pass on their color variations, even if they mate with others, because there's going to be more frequent of them. Well, they're mingling pretty good there with the other color, so that could end up changing the whole pattern as far as tribal color distribution. I feel like I'm on a really crappy version of the National Geographic show. Oh yes, the wild safari of the pond. Yeah, I wonder if David Attenborough would fill in for me for an episode or two. That'd be really skyrocket the ratings. And you guys ever play, what was it, like Sim Life? That was a pretty interesting game too. It was similar in nature as far as like species and evolution and stuff like that, but it had like little 2D icons of like a squirrel or a plant that would pop up and grow, and the map was like a grid that would have coordinates on it, and each coordinate would have a different thing like grass or tree, and the animals would move around and eat, and you could mess with like what they ate, what type of environment they lived in, stuff like that. It was very similar to this, but it was a little bit more abstract in my opinion. This really focuses down on a very specific type of experiment, whereas Sim Life was very broad and the attributes of the creatures it was there. I always say clunky because it was an old game, so the interface is, you know, clunky. I guess is the only word I can think of. That old DOS style game, like the original Civ back in that era. You know, if you guys are ever fans of that genre, that's all the old games that I really dig on. Yeah, Sim Life, Sim Earth, Sim Farm, all those great games. Stuff like that. Always fascinated with stuff like that. Big learning curve though in those games, right? Whereas something like this, you can kind of watch for a while and just kind of tinker with, and it's not because it's not really a game. You know, it's literally the idea of a petri dish, and you're just kind of messing around with it like I don't know, a kid with a magnifying glass burning ants, I guess. There's another version too. I think it's called Gene Pool that this guy Jeffrey Ventrella did. It's sort of like an upgrade on this. The graphical style is completely different. They look more like, you know, germs and cells and bacteria that are linked together into chains. But I think the concept's the same. I think it's fluid dynamics in a pond. I just found that this one was a little bit better in terms of making you feel like you were in a science lab. The creatures were pretty straightforward. It didn't the graphics and stuff. The simplicity of it, I think, helps. Um, but yeah, you can check out Ventrella.com. I usually put the link in the description box if you want to check out Gene Pool or one of his other creations. He's got a lot of like simulations of like biomechanics and all that stuff on there. Some are just animations, some are interactive. But it would be pretty sweet if they did an upgrade, you know, for this one. Just I like to, you know, keep the graphics the same. Maybe add in sort of like a predator prey paradigm. That would be pretty sweet. You know, critters that are scavengers that can feed on carrion or feed on maybe like the young before the young are fully developed. You know, predatory type things going on. Um, Different environmental variables, maybe. That's it for this episode of the Darwin Pond Show. Thank you for tuning in, and there'll be a new episode coming soon.